We are at war. And I think it's important that Europe would not fall into a situation where it is at war with itself. You know, Trump is Trump. I think there is a lot of ego and legacy desire.
Europe is already digitally colonized.
Trump will go away, one way or another. If Trump can happen, worse than Trump can happen as well.
That's a bold statement.
You know, I like bold statements, right? Do we want Elon Musk 2.0 in Europe? If you transform or transport energy, you will have losses. Everybody knows how to create ChatGPT. You just need the resources to do it. The big difference with the Manhattan Project and what we see today is that there was top secrecy about the Manhattan Project. The first test of the atomic bomb was kept secret. Do you know how the world got to know about it?
So, what if we did build differently? What if the mistake wasn't that Europe doesn't have its own Azure or Microsoft, but that we copied the hyperscalers model at all? Because let's be clear, the centralized cloud model, that was not an accident. It was born out of specific environment, a massive domestic market, deep capital pools, tolerance for extreme concentration of power, and a culture that rewards scale above all else. And that worked in the United States. But Europe is not one country. We are fragmented, heavily regulated, built around welfare systems, and operating with tighter margins, and carrying significantly more public debt. So the real question is not, can Europe build its own hyperscaler? The real question is, should it? Because if we can't outscale the US or centralized infrastructure, maybe the smarter move isn't scale, maybe it's architecture. And this is where Raf thinking becomes interesting. Because long before cloud became fashionable, he was building distributed systems that don't rely on the one center, systems that don't collapse when one node falls, systems that think in streams and not in snapshots. And this is where the idea of the flight recorder comes in. And this is where we start exploring something radically different. Not a bigger cloud, a different foundation. The next chapter is the arms race. We already talked about the war a little bit, but when I was watching a few weeks for the second time Oppenheimer, those that doesn't know, it's a film about building the first atomic bomb. I kept wondering, because are we living through a similar race today? Because only this time it's not about just splitting atoms, but are we witnessing a kind of new Manhattan Project, but then for AGI?
The big difference with the Manhattan Project and what we see today is that there was top secrecy about the Manhattan Project. The world only knew about the atomic bomb when it went off. Even the first test of the atomic bomb was kept secret. Do you know how the world got to know about it? Because Kodak, you know, the photo company, Kodak discovered anomalies in their photographic film. So they noticed that there was exposure to unexposed film, and they were the only explanation could be, well, we have had some gamma ray source. So Kodak was in fact the company that discovered this for the first time. But until then, nobody knew about it. The world only knew about the atomic bomb when Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened. What's the difference with today? Now, everybody knows transformer models. Everybody knows in theory, it's all open source. Everybody knows how to create ChatGPT. You just need the resources to do it. You need the energy, you need the water, and you need the sand, the silicon. So it's not so much a war of minds or a war of technological capability. It's really very much more primitive than that. It's a war of resources. Who can get the chips? Who can get the memory? Who can get the electricity? Let's not forget about that. Who can get the water to cool all that stuff? Because I tell you, these big data centers, they they could serve as a heating source for a small city. So really, if you ask me, is it a war like comparable with the atom bomb? I say, well, no, it's not, because there are plenty of bright engineers and scientists who can recreate ChatGPT. It's really much more primitive. Resources, rare earth metals, silicon. Well, silicon is everywhere, but electricity.
Mhm. Very important. If I'm not mistaken, China is building 25 plants. Here in Europe, it's already hard to build one. So it already shows. And if you then see the role of Trump in the deal with Ukraine about their minerals, now in Greenland, also Congo, if I'm not mistaken, recently, Belgium, they were talking with the museum to find to have access to the maps for all the resources from Congo. So you see that Trump is already probably knowing things, that he thinks, okay, we need resources, we need elements so that we can strengthen ourselves against others. And the others will be not America, I think. Because why should he involve himself so heavily in, let's say, in 1 year since he's a president, to do all these kind of actions, while in the previous term he was not worrying about that?
Well, I'm not sure if you remember, Kevin, but he was already talking about buying Greenland in the first term in office. And, you know, Trump is Trump. Uh, I think there is a lot of ego and legacy desire involved in his politics as well. But to the point, Greenland, well, no, not just Greenland, resources are or have become even more important, are the key factor to win this whole technology race. And we are lucky, as Europe, we are lucky in one sense that America and China are betting heavily on highly centralized models. They build huge data centers for their inference of their large scale language models. That's a choice they have made. Now, whenever you make a choice, you lose an option. You know, in Dutch, they say, kiezen is verliezen. So whenever you make a choice, you lose something else. And maybe, just maybe, it requires some research, but maybe there is a chance for Europe to take another path. Instead of building, as you said, it's tremendously difficult to build large scale energy factories. It's not a good fit to build large scale data centers. So maybe if Europe would be able to take a different path, the other path, a more decentralized path, maybe we can make a difference, and maybe we can create something that is a better fit for the European reality.
And also a reality where, let's say, war is in our backyard, because lately lost until the last World War, yeah, let's say the last 50 years, no one was thinking about that. But now, you think that with an entire distributed European solution, we could be independent, or at least for a part independent of the big tech, but also be more resilient, sovereign on the key elements with European companies. Is that your take here?
Yes, that's exactly my take. And in fact, it's a return to the basics of what the internet was created for in the first place. It was created to survive a nuclear war or another big calamity. Well, Kevin, we are currently living in the biggest calamity Europe has seen in the past 70 years. We see war in Ukraine, but we also see this huge threat coming from across the Atlantic. We are at war, and I think it's important that Europe would not fall into a situation where it is at war with itself.
Mhm. Because we have nothing to offer. There is nothing. We have nothing, yeah, except the brains. But at the end, we have no resources. We have no big companies. If you compare the biggest in Belgium, Europe, yeah, to be honest, they are peanuts in US. So that's also my main concern is they it's a walkover, and I think that's something that we have to change very quickly. That not only people in the government, but also founders, people that has already a big company, but they don't want to, let's say, that they're not selling it, but they are building it further, build something strong here, so that we are less dependent. Let's say defense. We have nothing or not that much in defense in Europe. We have to build everything from nearly scratch. Um,
Kevin, what
Infrastructure,
has
telecom infrastructure,
exactly
um, internet connection, things like that. We are so dependent on all these technologies that are not situated in Europe. And I think from, let's say, a defensive point of view, if you want to protect yourself as a region, then you have to also have technology that's only coming from your own region, because at the end, check what happens with Elon Musk satellites. If he says I'm in favor of Ukraine today, and he switches his mind and he says I'm in favor of Russia, yeah, it has a direct impact. And I think that's the whole thing what we have to do. The same with the satellites that we have in our space. We have nearly no satellites that are European. So how can we then protect ourselves? So I think we are running behind on a lot of, yeah, let's say, fields, where we have to invest a lot and very fast, because I think in 5-10 years we will see, in a way, elements that's, yeah, let's say, every decision today will have a very big impact then, and waiting is losing. It's also the same what you mentioned there. Yeah, you have to make a choice, but also making no choice is also making a choice. And I think that's what happens today in Europe. We push it forward. We always think, yeah, it's not now, where it's not urgent enough. But I think we miss a lot of opportunity. Okay, now with Trump, you see a small shift in urgency. Also, Putin is putting a little pressure here and there, but it's more from only a defensive reason.
a
And
reactive?
yes,
It's a reaction. We live in a reactive society right now, not in a proactive society. And you know, Kevin, the reason Europe has been at the forefront of technological and scientific advancement for centuries, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, it all happened in Europe. Europe was the place where huge technological advances happened. Now, why was that? And this is not a popular opinion, right? But why was this? Could this only happen in Europe? because we were very divided. We were very good at making war with each other. There, we were very good at competing with one another. Let's not use the word war, but it was the fact. If you live in a continent where everybody is your enemy, I can guarantee you that you will put money in research and technology. War, however ugly it is, but war is the best driver for technological advancement. Have a look at Ukraine. Which country do you think is the most advanced in drone technology?
By the way, I don't know if you read that, but there was an exercise a few weeks ago where Europe was competing with Ukraine, and Ukraine, they demolished them.
Well, there
It
you
was
have
like
it.
say, it was, let's say, how you, I have to check the words, but let's say it was not a wake-up call. It was, let's say, a blamage for Europe, where they have so much resources, but Ukraine, they have so much experience in the last nearly 4 or 5 years, right? With the warfare against Russia day in, day out, and they had to adapt so quickly to find strategies, techniques, tactics that work so well. Yeah, that's insane. You know, and that shows that not only money, because that's often the idea, just throw money in it and it will solve a problem. No, it's way more. It's also how you collaborate, what you do with the money, and how you then also can really, how you say that, it's how you can create a kind of stimulus out of that. And I think that's the point. When people are with the back to the wall, that's the moment when the pressure is hard, and then they have to think completely out of the box. And I think that's where we are within Europe. And I think we should always be in that kind of state. Always think the last day is tomorrow, and think about that, how you can avoid it. And it's the same. You have always, like, and Nvidia is a good example. Jensen Young, he says, okay, I always think I have for 1 month money. That's how I run my business. And that's how innovation is then also stimulated, because you push people very hard. And in Europe, I don't want to say we are laid back, but in a way you can say it like that, because if we compare China, they are way further against us, and also way faster. I'm going to talk about China, US, India, the same. They have also the people to build things very fast.
Given in terms of when it comes to innovation and the drive to innovate, the European Union, and another unpopular opinion, but the European Union is probably the worst thing that could have happened to Europe in terms of innovation, because it eradicates competition. It creates a big market, fair enough. But where is the competition? Where is the strive? Europe has been putting all their money in this Green Deal thing, renewables, and some elitist fever dream, really. But look where we are now. We are nowhere. We are literally nowhere. We have some fancy windmills at sea. We have some fancy solar panels on people's roofs. But in terms of strategic and even tactical resilience, we are nowhere. We are a sitting duck. And this is thanks this is thanks to the European Union and what it has done, because the original idea of the European Union, or the organization, the precursor organizations, was to prevent war. And of course, that's a noble cause, right? Prevent war. fantastic. But if you prevent war, strife, competition, you lose the drivers for innovation.
I agree, fully agree. Now, let's go to the rapid fire. I have 5 questions. You can answer yes or no, or agree or disagree, but no further explanation.
Okay.
So, Europe is already digitally colonized.
Yes.
Within 5 years, 50% of the global workforce will need to find a new job.
Yes.
Governments are not prepared for AI-driven tax erosion.
Yes.
Copying the US hyperscaler model will solve Europeans' problems.
No.
And distributed infrastructure will outperform centralized clouds within a decade.
Yes.
At Semlink, we believe innovation doesn't start by copying what already exists. We question centralized assumptions. We explore distributed alternatives. And we look at how the architecture shapes economics and how economics shapes sovereignty. So we don't claim to have all the answers. That's not possible. But we are committed to push the boundaries. If that resonates, you have to reach out. So given Europe's fragmentation, the high public debt, and structural economic pressures, would building our own hyperscaler strengthen our economy, or simply replicating a model like them does not fit our reality?
Well, my fear, if we do that, or if we should do that, of course, it's always, it's not just a matter of either this or either that. It's always a combination of the two. But I'm afraid, well, firstly, do we want Elon Musk 2.0 in Europe? Would it fit for Europe? So that's the first question. Do we want to copy not just the infrastructural model, but also the business model from the United States? What kind of impact would this have on society? I don't know. So, my opinion in this would be that we need a hybrid story. Without a doubt, scale for compute, does make sense. We need that. But next to that, it should not be the only thing we rely on. It could be a combination of the two. It should be a combination of the two.
But in a way, the core should be a distributed European with on top the less dependency somewhere else.
Absolutely. Our aim should be to be completely sovereign, completely decoupled from the United States. We cannot no longer consider the United States as a trustworthy ally. Maybe in the short run, but do you want to take the risk in the long run? So yes, we need independence. All right. In parallel, we need to be resilient because we don't have the luxury of an ocean in the west and an ocean in the east. We have Russia to deal with in the east. So, indeed, we need to think about which model would fit for Europe. And if I may be extreme, who can guarantee that the European Union will still exist in 10 years?
That's a bold statement.
You know, I like bold statements, right? But and I also like difficult questions.
That's like I like to ask them. Okay, no, yeah, it's true. I think also a kind of hybrid system that could work, but to be honest, could also work on a global scale, because at the end, recently, let's say in the last 2 years, the impact of outages, CrowdStrike, bomb, all airplanes down, all those, all the impact there. Then AWS, Azure down, bomb, again, so much economical impact. So I think we should, as Europe, vouch for a complete digital infrastructure built and managed by ourselves. And I don't going to say it has to be centralized or decentralized. That's another discussion. But I think that's at least a first step. A first step in the direction where Europe, at least, and then also Belgium, can take more control. But, and I think that's also one of the discussions we had before. Let's say we did an exercise about the Belgian population, about how many people that are unemployed, sick, and retired, and compare that with the total PPP. Yeah, it was an insane figure, of course, and that figure will only rise 2-3% over the coming years, because at the end more people become older. And you will see there is also a friction in between how we will pay it. It's already hard today. It will become only harder over time. So how do you think we should tackle that? Because you can't say to elder people, you have no pension anymore. To sick people, the whole social system that we have today will fall apart. What are the solutions there?
Well, yeah, if the whole social and economic system disintegrates, when that happens, not if that happens, it will happen. When that happens, we need tools to cope with that. And instead of envisioning a model where we have the classic flow of value, people work, pay taxes, and the larger society benefits from it, maybe we can also explore a system where wealth, or not even wealth, but value, is created at the point where benefits would flow to. So, a concrete example: imagine, every car these days is smart. Even the fridge is smart. Everything has a computer. The only thing that doesn't have a computer right now are homes. So imagine a black box in the garage or whatever or wherever, a black box in the garage that contains a micro data center. We will not even discuss the hardware. Let's simply discuss the principle. So this black box in every garage would produce value. It produces compute. It can serve as a kind of AI node. So it produces value, and this value can be paid for, can be traded, and can be paid for by the parties or the actors that consume this compute. So there is a value creation locally in the home of the elderly couple, in the home of the sick person, but it's a black box and it continuously creates some value. From that value, we can at least lighten the burden of the the um, the communal benefit burden. You know what I mean? The now everything is centralized in a big budget per country. Benefits are paid from that big budget, but only if we can reduce the load on society for building or for paying those benefits, let's call it. I think only if we can reduce that well, reducing that part of financing could offer us at least some solace when it comes to people getting older, sick people, etc., unemployed people. Let's not forget that. So, yeah,
But
please.
do you mean then, for example, that, let's say, the figures are very simple. In Belgium, 40 billion of the total BBP GDP goes to those three groups. And that means every year the government is spending 14 billion and more based on the growth on those people. Okay, you can say, okay, the less people that are not unemployed, okay, nice. Okay, remember we said maybe unemployment will rise, so means group will also go up. So the expenses to pay also them will grow. Eh? So the question then I have, and I'd like to hear your take there. Do you think that the government should then be partial contributing to building such a solution, a kind of distributed solution where, let's say, instead of paying them an income or a replacement income for sickness or for a pension, to say, no, we don't going to do this. We're going to do it differently. We're going to say, we're going to install hardware within your house where that device will create value for those companies in Belgium, maybe in Europe, and they can grow. And via that return, we will pay your pensions, hopefully completely, maybe not completely, but at the end, it's kind of investment in the future. Is that the idea where you then say, okay, but also if you're working, you can buy it yourself directly without that the government involved? Is that the idea of a kind of distributed system spread over Belgium? Is that how you envision it?
Yes, yes. We have seen this model before. In the days of Bitcoin and all these digital currencies, there were people who put a small cluster of mining, they called it mining nodes, and they were trying to mine Bitcoin. Of course, in my opinion, the government or the state should provide, let's call it minimal basic infrastructure, not minimal basic income, but minimal basic infrastructure. So just enough infrastructure, the black box in the garage that actually produces value, produces compute.
But it's
And
not
that
only
is
that. I think it goes even further because it's compute is one element, but it's also about communication, how you run systems to defend yourself. It's because at the end, compute is just one element in what you can achieve, and I think it's more that I think today, if we see how the entire infrastructure in our global world is built, it's very centralized. It's very located. Let's say data center is one spot. The internet, you have a few spots. If you can, let's say disable them in a way, you have no internet anymore. If you bomb down all the data centers in Europe, you don't need so much bombs, I guess. Yeah, you have no data centers and all the companies can't work. They can't operate. So I think the governments in Europe should, based on your input, invest more in replacing the centralized data centers and move to a more decentralized infrastructure that's kind of fundamental, like water and food. Is that?
it's absolutely, and it's not really a matter of should they do it. If they are smart enough, they will do it. Because let's just think for a second. You don't even need 500 ballistic missiles to destroy 500 data centers. Cut a few cables in the North Sea, or cut a few cables in the Atlantic Ocean, and what already happened, and you have a big problem. Now, imagine a situation excuse me, imagine a situation where you have indeed this country, this small country, where every home is equipped with a black box and an antenna on the roof that connects with the antenna on the roof of the neighbor and thus creates a communication mesh in for every home in Belgium. How many rockets will put in need to destroy that infrastructure? It doesn't matter how many cables will be cut in the North Sea. Your infrastructure, little Belgium, will stay functional. Maybe they will destroy a couple of houses. Maybe they will destroy a couple of larger nodes in your mesh. Maybe they will do that, but the system as a whole will be very hard to destroy. On top of that, and let's not forget this, what is the cost of replacement? When you destroy 300, 400, or 100 data centers, what's the cost of replacing that thing? When you destroy 500 black boxes in the homes of people, it's a totally different calculation,
Of
right?
course, but it has, of course, other, let's say, potential problems, like delays and things like that, and how do you let them collaborate? But at the end, I think that's one of the things that we are dealing with in our next steps.
Now, if you explode a nuclear weapon in the ionosphere and you generate an electromagnetic pulse,
Yeah, then everything is down, of course.
everything is down as well.
Yeah.
But that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. And so it means, who are then crucial European partners that could assist this? Is that then the type of telcos where because at the end you need connectivity. Connectivity is, let's say, fiber. In Belgium, you have a few. Is that one of the crucial players in, let's say, building up a distributed ecosystem? I don't want to say a system, but it's more an ecosystem, because you can also build applications on top, even models and things like that. Where do you see the potential partners?
I think there are three crucial players in this story: providers of compute, so providers of hardware, providers of communications, so the telcos, and providers of energy. Now, there's a problem because energy, by its very nature, is has a centralized energy infrastructure, has a centralized topology, not 100% centralized, but it relies on central energy or electricity generation, right? So one of the big problems in Ukraine today is that Russia keeps attacking their power plants. How do they cope with that? They put per street electricity generators, right? So they are starting to decentralize their energy generation. Belgium is filled with solar panels. Everybody has a solar panel on their roof. Well, that's a good start, right?
Yeah, but you're not completely isolated. Let's say you can have solar panels, but if the juice from the main street is down, you have also no energy in your house.
That's a technical problem, and that's a problem that arrives from the big tech. Well, meet little tech in Belgium, the little tech energy providers, the NGs and the Luminuses, and of course they want to keep the monopoly on energy distribution, and of course they want to influence whether or not your solar panel can deliver energy directly to your neighbor. They are the middlemen. They want to take their profit. They want to take their margins. But that's a political problem, I think. Of course, there is a technical problem as well. It's very difficult to put a wire from my backyard to your backyard. But it's how it's the monopolies of these energy providers that stand in the way of true progress. Because if you want a decentralized system, you need to have decentralized energy, decentralized communication, and decentralized compute.
Yes, and to be honest, that exact thing was also something I remembered when I had a meeting with one of our Dutch friends, because they wanted to create a kind of proof of concept phase in Amsterdam, so that a few blocks could be self-sufficient, meaning that all the green energy created versus all the energy needed was completely balanced between houses without the let's say the middleman in between. And I think that that's indeed what we need, so that at least there is less influence from, let's say, third parties, but at least where I can, because that was the entire idea, where I create too much energy and I can sell it directly to my neighbor and vice versa, so that at least that entire environment can be, let's say, off grid without having dependencies from others. And I think that was a very good idea. And I think that's also the idea, what you mentioned. We need a more flexible energy grid that is not relying on, we have to always deal with the Elias and the Fluviuses of this world. No, it's possible to do it, let's call it in IT, peer-to-peer, directly from individual to individual, or from an individual to a business, or vice versa. Because if the business has too much green energy on its roof and it's not producing enough, probably he has leftover. Okay, give it to me because I have no solar panels, for example.
Okay, true. But of course, there is always the matter of physics, right? If you transform or transport energy, you will have losses. So, the best way to deal with this question is to consume the energy where it is produced, at the time it is produced, preferably, right? So, this whole idea of creating an energy market and such, okay, that I'm sure it has value, but it's very difficult to accomplish. There are many factors in that.
Yeah, but it's also, of course, linked with that the grid as is today. Yeah, if there is an outage, even if there is nothing wrong with your own house, you have no electricity. And that should change. If there is something wrong with the highway, it does not have to have by default an impact on my house. And that means, for example, in a distributed ecosystem, we need houses, even if the main cable is broken, that my solar panels can still run and facilitate me in my day to day as nothing happens, because I am fully equipped with hardware, with solar panels, that I can work, I can cook, can do everything what I want. Or even I have a car that can push the energy out of his batteries in my house. That is not possible today. And I think that is a very important element, that every house should be, let's say, isolated on its own and can run on its own without the direct dependency of a grid that is today a dependency on our future.
Yeah, well, let's be precise. It's a matter of politics. It's a matter of policy. It's the energy companies have all this power given to them by law, not by physics, but by law, to turn off your solar panels. That's not right. That doesn't make you independent. So maybe the law has to change.
But that takes time. And that's just not time we have.
But this is not time. I think we should try. Maybe we should listen to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians, they told the Europeans, well, what we have discovered to be very valuable in what we do is to reduce turnover time. Not wait for, you don't have the luxury to wait for another year. It has to change, maybe not today, but at least tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's maybe also a good moment to maybe introduce Makula, because that's also something that that you worked on in the last years.
Yes.
Can you describe that a little bit to give the people an idea what Makula could really mean for this distributed system?
Okay, I will not go too deep in the matter. Maybe we can do this for another time, Kevin. Maybe that can be another episode. But okay, so Macula is, in essence, a system that enables a mesh of computers. So imagine those black boxes in the garages of people. Well, you can put this black box there, and that's all well and nice, but you only create value if you connect that black box to the black box of your neighbor, and you create a huge, large scale, but decentralized mesh. So you don't connect to a central server, you only create a network. That's Macula. That's the technology that enables this.
And it connects PCs, servers.
It's anything you like. It connects desktops, laptops, micro data centers, larger data centers. It doesn't matter. It's
Everything
built
with
upon
CPU and internet access.
exactly. It's built upon proven technology, rather old technology, but very
All
much
is stable, right?
proven and battle tested. So it's built upon Erlang. And maybe your audience will not be immediately familiar with Erlang. Well, we all have been using Erlang since the 80s, because it was built for Ericsson to enable their telephone distribution center. So, why do I tell you this? Imagine that you are in a situation where somebody is having a heart attack and you need to call 911, and you pick up the phone. Okay, I'm an old guy. Let's not go into that, but you pick up the phone and there is no dial tone. Why am I telling you this? Erlang as a technology was built from the beginning to be resilient. It never breaks down. It's always available. So it's the perfect basis, and to my knowledge, the only basis that can guarantee that kind of availability and resilience. So that's why I used Erlang to build Macula.
Okay. So Makula is then a kind of software layer that connects hardware and create a kind of virtual mesh who is participating with the objective creating
To
cluster.
build to build applications on top of that. So it's really a base infrastructure that creates what they call application primitives. So PubSub paradigm, remote procedure calling paradigm. I will not go into the technical details too much. I think we should do this perhaps in another episode, right? But this is Macula. It's the to help your mental model. It's the nervous system that connects all these black boxes together. All right, that's Macula. Then another aspect of this is something that I like to call the flight recorder that you can put in your business or in your home or whatever. This is an idea. It's not my original idea, um, but this is what I call that flight recorder. And the name of that flight recorder is ReckonDB. So ReckonDB, another easy mental model, is just a flight recorder that you put in that black box in your garage, or that you put on your desktop computer or your laptop. I don't care. It's a kind of flight recorder that you put on that hardware. It just records what is happening in terms of applications in your system. And again, I will not go too much into technical detail. Just remember the idea of a flight recorder in that black box. Okay. So when you have these two components, you can build, let's say, 90% of all business applications that are relevant to do business. All business applications are built to support a certain business process, and this kind of infrastructure is fit for that.
So may I ask that, for example, my business, I have a small business, I hope to grow, that let's say I create a mesh with my own devices, or I put one device in that mesh. On top of that, I have, let's say, a kind of database that stores all the actions from my entire business. That's your flight recorder. And on top of that, that flight recorder is not only the data, but also the event. So it's the combination of it. With on top of that, then applications that specifically are tailored for my business. So it can be, let's say, a kind of SaaS oriented approach or an agentic approach, but always talking with my flight recorder. Is that the entire
Yeah,
setup of this
yeah,
distributed mesh?
correct. And furthermore, the mesh or Macula supports a pub-sub mechanism. And why is that important? Most of the current SaaS applications or even integrations between two businesses are based on a imperative model. What do I mean with that? So an imperative model means that I send a request to do something, hence imperative. I tell you or your business, hey, do this for me. Okay? That's the imperative form. Hey, do this for me. You receive that request. Your backend processes this request and sends you an answer back, or it does something or whatever, right? It fulfills a business process. Okay, that has value, and we should not throw that away. But you can imagine how complicated things get if you have not one partner in your business, but you have, say, 50 partners, 30 suppliers, 20 customers, whatever, right? Imagine what the complexity that would emerge from integrating with them on a imperative basis. In other words, sending a request and waiting for the answer. That doesn't scale, and it becomes very messy very quickly. Right? So, what Macula also supports is this pub-sub model, where a business no longer asks, but the business tells. This is the tell, don't ask principle. So imagine you are a business and you have a infrastructure that allows you to emit to the world. You can transmit broadcasts to the world. Hey, I just completed an order with this and this company. Okay, maybe let's not make the mental model too difficult. Of course, there are security concerns, but those are manageable. Just think about the principle. So you emit, hey, I am Sumlink. I just completed a partnership agreement with I don't know, whatever company. But imagine that you could broadcast this as a fact. You broadcast this as a fact, and other parties are interested in Sumlink, and they listen for your news, for your topics, and you it's something like that. It's not more complicated than that. But now think about how complex a system like that would be compared to your imperative system with your 50 companies. It would become a lot simpler because it would not be your responsibility to maintain all this infrastructure to connect with your partners. You just say, you want to partner with me? Hey, here's the list of the channels I broadcast on. Maybe some of those can be of interest. You deal with it. It's a reversal of control. In IT, they call this inversion of control. And it is often an elegant answer to difficult questions. It's like turning the tables. Not my problem.
But it's a good idea to maybe create a separate episode about macro, because I know there is more than let's say infrastructure, the flight recorder and the applications. There is more, but let's keep it for the next one. Now let's wrap it up. I think very interesting discussion we had so far with a lot of bold statements. I think a lot of people will, let's say, comment with the agreements and disagreements of what we have said. But let's come on.
Never read a comment.
Yeah, but it's interesting to go in dialogue with everyone and find out how people how people are thinking about this topic. It's an important topic for all of us. But I think one of the questions I still have is, what do you think is what would Europe look like if we moved from a centralized dependency as we know it today to a decentralized economy?
I think that Europe would become much more resilient, not just in terms of geopolitics. It would also it would also allow for the birth of an alternative economic system, because the economic status quo as we know today is finished. Maybe people don't realize it yet, but it is finished. It is a dying man on a sickly bed, on a dead bed. So we need something different, an alternative.
And in 5 years, again, 5 years is long, but what must Makela have then achieved?
Well, that's not my concern what it will have. What I hope it will have achieved is that at least I don't think in big numbers or world domination or whatever. What I hope is that that maybe Makula could be a kind of test bed, or that Flanders, maybe even just tiny Flanders, could be a test bed that proves the concept of macula, and then it's a very scalable and repeatable system, and then let others decide if they adopt it or not. Imagine that macula could bring another source of income for the Flemish government. I am no wizard. Yes, I am no wizard. But no, even if it could alleviate the burden of paying all these benefits to all these people. People are getting old. That's a truth. That's something we know. So we need answers to this.
Okay, so your take here is let's use Makla as an innovation enabler that has also a very strong social impact on our local economy and hopefully bigger, but that's to see. Okay, but let
Bigger is not my concern. Other people may earn money with it. I don't care too much, as long as you know, as it becomes a weapon that can tackle unknown issues.
okay, and I think with this note we can wrap it up. So thank you very much, Raf, for having you in this episode. It was a very interesting discussion. And
Thank you for having me, Kevin. It was a pleasure and an honor.
so let's zoom out one last time. Europe is not short on talent, even not short on engineers, and definitely not on ideas. What we are short on is architectural courage. We've been trying to compete by copying, building smaller versions of something else's model, running yesterday's race, just a few laps behind. But maybe the real opportunity isn't scale. Maybe it's alignment. Alignment between infrastructure and society, between compute and sovereignty, between economic value and distributed ownership. Because architecture isn't neutral. It decides who owns the data, who owns the value, who controls the system, and who benefits from the growth. And if Europe wants resilience, if it wants sovereignty, if it wants a sustainable economic model in an AI driven world, then it cannot simply replicate hyperscalers. It has to rethink the foundations. Distributed systems are not just a technical decision, they are an economic decision, even a political decision, and maybe a social decision. So the real question is not, can we build something as big as the US? The real question is, can we build something that fits Europe? That's the bet. And that's the experiment. And that's where Makla comes in. And whether it succeeds or not, what matters is that we start asking the right questions. Because in the end, the future won't be built by copying, it will be built by rethinking.